Hello, everybody. Hope you're all doing well. Today is going to be Chopin Variations on a theme by Rossini, which is this one. So we're going to do some warm-ups based on some of the elements that are contained in this piece. This is actually on the diploma syllabus for the ABRSM. And if we have a look at the music, some things that sort of stick out for me, which I'd like to talk about in the warm-up, are getting a good staccato on notes. And that doesn't necessarily mean just short and dry, but getting a note that is lively in a short amount of time. So I've got an exercise for that. Got this articulation here where we've got the slur and the dots. Hello. And that's something that I'm going to do as well. What else do we have? We have some tricky intervals there, which we might get onto. Hello. And we've got some arpeggios using the Reichert daily exercises. We can practice those. And all these kind of arpeggio staccatos. In this final variation, that's we can use Tafnel and Gobert daily exercises. There's also some of these trill things here. So having melody notes and accompaniment. We often have that in solo flute pieces such as Bach, but we also have it in pieces like this where we want to show a melodic line but also an accompaniment as well. So those are some of the things that we'll be covering in the warm-up today. So even if you don't know this piece, there'll be some things that you can practice which will be useful in other pieces because it's very much the same kind of thing. So starting with, the key is E major, so I thought we could just play a nice E major scale slur just to get us in the right sort of character. So we'll do it slurred first, and then we'll do something else afterwards. Just go at your own speed. Good, and then let's do it sing and play at the same time. Good, and then let's do without the tongue, but separate, so just like that, so blow for each note. Good, and then one more time, just slurred. Good, and a small point about scales, which Wib was very strong about when I played scales for him. So always make sure that your final note, it has a good length and it's got vibrancy and a really good sound. So it should be your best note of the whole scale. So often we're like, oh, we've done the scale and then we just finish. But if you can finish with a really good note at the end, that's quite a good thing to get into the habit of. Okay, so first point will be to doing a staccato. Because of the nature of the flute, that it's doesn't really have the same resonating chamber as a violin or a cello or the piano. When we play short notes, it often just comes out very dry and bird-like. And to avoid that, we need to make sure that we're doing a nice little reaction to each sound note, so that there's a small diminuendo, so that the sound starts and goes without it being sort of stopped by the tongue or in the throat. So if you say or sing ha, ha, and notice how the sound starts and then there's a slight decay of the sound. That's what we want when we play as well. So when we do it on the flute, it can often just be the start of the note and then it's sort of, it's cut somewhere by your tongue or in the throat. So we want to make sure that the air really moves freely, but that there is a decay. So we'll practice doing longer notes first and gradually getting shorter. So we'll start with 4 beats, 3, 2, 1, and then half. And so you're going to do the same movement for each note value. So you're just going to cover, blowing down, and then uncover by blowing forward and up. So the jaw's going forward. So you just do a nice diminuendo on each one. So let's do on a low G, 4 beats, with a diminuendo at the end. Good, now let's do 3. 2. And 1. And then half. Okay, so by doing it from the long value first, you get into the habit of doing that for each one, so that the last note isn't and dry, but it has a nice reaction to it. And see when you're playing in your room if you can really hear that sort of echo and ring rather than being cut dry. So let's do that one more time, and then we're going to do it the octave higher. Let's do it again on the low G. Okay, so when you get to the quaver at the end, you can just repeat that just to get used to doing it. Okay, octave higher, same thing, so 4, 3, 2, 1, half. Good, and let's do the harmonic above that, so keep your fingers as a G, but we're going to blow over to the next harmonic, which should sound like a D. Okay, good. Now let's do that on the note higher, but we're just going to do the quavers this time. So we're going to do 4 quavers, each with a little breath in between. So we'll start with low ones. Like that. Okay, so we'll just do 4 and then octave and harmonic. So we're on to A flat. That's it, good. Next note up, let's have an A. Good, and just notice that in between all those notes that the air can just come back freely, so that you're not holding your air, but you're just letting it go and then it comes back. So it's like a dog panting. So it's a quick exchange of air. So you're not using a great deal of air for such a short note, but then you don't have to take in much after that either. So it's just a little exchange of air. Good. Now, because the melody is like this, we've got a higher note and then a lower note, and the higher one should be slightly louder because it's on the main beat. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, like that. So we're going to practice this. So we're going to do the harmonic of G again, starting with the highest, the third harmonic, coming down to 2, 3, 2. So let's just do this bar first. So that's going to sound a bit like, so it's louder and softer on the lower one. So you need to blow down for the highest one so that it's not sharp, and blow slightly higher for the lower one because it's softer. Okay, let's do that one more time. Good. And then we need to practice the other way, because we have at the end of that phrase, bum, bum, loud to soft, but this time low to high. So we're going to practice this one. So we'll start with the lower one, G, and going up to the next harmonic, but softer. So it'll be. So try to keep that nice reaction on each note, but your positioning for your angles are going to be slightly different because of the dynamic. So with the louder one, you're going to be lower at the start and then lift quickly. And then the softer note, you won't be so low, but a bit lower and still lift because you're doing it in innuendo. Okay, so let's try that again. So low to high. Okay, let's do that a note higher, so A flat. So we'll do high to low and then low to high. Okay, one more time. Okay, so you can practice that on all the harmonics, and it actually really warms up your embouchure and your air stream. Good. The next thing is this articulation of the dots with the slurring, which we had in 4A Fantasy as well. So it's the slightly longer tonguing. So what I'd like to practice is just that figure, but in a whole scale of E major. So we do D, 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 like that. So I'll just show you what it's like. I've written down the first one. So it starts on an E, goes up to C sharp, back down to D sharp, and then E. So it just takes care of the corner there. So let's do it slurred and then do it with long tonguing. Okay, one more time. Slurred. Then we go up a note. And another note. And then let's just do those three but up the octave now. So starting on E again. F sharp. Okay, so you can practice that on all the notes of E major. Just start one note higher each time, or something similar. You don't have to do exactly that, but it's just because that's how it appears in this piece. So when we get to there, it's that's how that one fits in there. So we've done the staccato with the louder to softer articulation of long tonguing. Next point would be, yes, let's tackle this first. The arpeggios that we get in variation 3. So if you've got the music, you can check that one. I would like to do the Reichert. So if you haven't got this with you, I apologize, but you can watch it back later and grab it. And so if you get to, this is a good way of using your Reichert studies. If you find the E major one on number 2, that is basically lots of arpeggios for E major. And I would just practice that like so, just making sure that the lowest note after the, I don't know if you can see, like here, the lower note doesn't come out loud, so we don't have don't allow the lowest note to be loud. So with the variation, that's what we want as well. We don't want the low E. We want to hear the top note. Dee, dum, dee, dum, bum. So that we want to hear that melody. So you need to blow down a little bit again for the top G sharp, and then higher for the low E so that it's not flat when it's softer. So that's how I deal with that section. With the little bits of trilling that goes on here, yeah, you can see it here. You can see that we have the melody note and then a little accompaniment of B to C sharp back to B, which I've written out as a scale. So you can use scales in all of these ways. They're so flexible. So this is the articulation, staccato, and then 3 slurred. So you can play each note of the scale as the staccato, but remember that that doesn't mean just short and dry, but has a lot of nice liveliness and bounce. And then you add in B, C sharp B afterwards. So if I keep that here, let's just do just the first one there. So E, B, C, B, C sharp B. Okay, so always coming back to a louder melody note. Let's do the next one with F sharp. And then G sharp. And then A. And so on. In this piece, we have trills on those, so that both trill keys going off on the C sharp. So bum ba ria da dum ba ria. And when we're playing it this at the speed that it needs to go at, there isn't much time to do a lot of trills. So I would just recommend doing like a mordant, not much more than that. So just a quick flick of the both trill keys is enough. So let's try that now. So it's the same thing, but now putting a trill on those notes. Okay, so that's how I would practice that one. And there's another one where it goes down to an A instead. So this example here, just done it quickly. E, B, A, B, F, B, A, B, like that. So we can practice the same thing. Instead of going up to C sharp, it's going to go down to A from the B. Okay, so let's do that one from an E. And then from an F sharp. And then G sharp. Okay, so then you can play in variation 4, we have that at about bar 9. Okay, so we want to just show that melody with a nice pulse and coming away for the staccatos, and then just keeping the accompaniment part softer. So make sure that your staccato has enough energy on them to make sure that melody comes out. Okay, so that is how I would practice all of those things. And just, yeah, be creative with your scale practice so that you're always practicing them in a way that will benefit you in approaching repertoire like this. That's what I would suggest. If you have any questions, please do get in touch. Tomorrow is something different. I can't remember what I'm doing, but I will put it on. Would you use a trill key on the top E in the fast bit? No, I probably wouldn't, just because I generally don't like cheating. If you don't have a split E, yeah, so it's a little bit harder, I suppose. But I think it's important to actually practice that. So what I would do in that case, just to make sure that, are you talking about leaping up from a lower E to a higher E? Something like that. I would practice what you need to do with the jaw and fingers. Okay, that bit, yeah. So going from the lower E, it is probably easier just to like shove a trill key down. But a good way to practice doing that is coming from a closer note first, like the Moyse sonority exercises. So just try from D sharp. Obviously slower, but practicing it in stages like that is a good way to approach that. You have those kind of things in the Poulenc sonata as well, where you've got dee-da-dee-da-dum, dee-da-dee-da-dum. And it's tempting to use the trill key there to get the high E out, but you can practice that as harmonics. So in the Poulenc, you've got high E to C, I think. And if you're not blowing in the right place, you might get like splitting notes all over the place. So I would practice that on a C harmonic, because E and C belong to that harmonic. Then you find out that you really do need to guide the air up and down to get those two harmonics. Then when you put the fingers back, and you're doing that a little adjustment, you don't have any problems with splitting or not getting the E out. So yeah, I think it just takes a little bit more practice, especially if you don't have a split E, but that's how I would do that. Does anybody else have any questions about this piece? If not, I will see you tomorrow and have a good day.